Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Infuse Your Future podcast, where we bring together people and ideas who are making the world a better place. I'm your host, Dr. C. And today we have a special guest on our show for a number of reasons. First, it's our first author that we're interviewing on the show. And second, it's our first Future Friday podcast, which I'm excited about. And third, it's my husband. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Harish Pursnani. Welcome, Harish.
Hi, welcome. Oh, thank you. See, I'm already nervous in front of my wife.
Okay, so why don't you spend a little time telling us a bit about yourself and what it is you do in the world?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm happy to be here. I'm a technologist by profession. I've had a 25 plus year career dedicated to bridging the gap between technology and its users. I'm an engineer and a computer scientist, and also have good training in business. I've worked at some forward-thinking organizations such as IBM, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and recently Gilead Sciences. And recently I've been diving deep into artificial intelligence. That's, I think, in a nutshell. On the personal side, you might already know because you're listeners to Carla's podcast. We have two kids, son and a daughter, and a delightful golden retriever, English white golden retriever. And I like learning a lot. That's kind of my entertainment. Besides that, I think we'll take it from here, I guess.
Okay, thanks for that introduction. I believe that you have just published a book called ChatGPT Demystified. So I know that ChatGPT is quite popular right now. It's all a buzz everywhere. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your book. Why did you decide to write it? What is your interest in ChatGPT? Why it and why now?
So I'll just step back a little bit. I've always wanted to write, and I was pretty good at English when I was growing up. And I always wrote before this. I would dabble in small poems or stories, but never got to officially do it except for being the editor for my school magazine for a year. Fast forward, after my job, I was looking at different things, but also fun things. So I decided to just double click on my past passion for writing. And I ended up writing some children's books under a non-diploma. And 3 are published, many more on the way. And most of them have human illustrations except the first one. In the first one, I use artificial intelligence. I was a techie. I've spent all my career in technology, and I started researching about artificial intelligence more than I had encountered in my job. I was a digital lead, so I knew a lot about it, but not in terms of impact to the wider world. I was more concerned about how it impacted my company and so on, and that too in a startup fashion because we were not there yet as a company. So once I came across all of this, I started going deeper, became my small passion project on the side, and started doing something about ChatGPT. So essentially, it is in general, right? To me, it's a inflection point in human development. I'm trying to be less philosophical, but I do feel that it is a remarkable movement. People call it's an iPhone moment, but it's much beyond that. It is revolutionary as much as iPhone, but much more than that because it's cheaper, easier, and it's much more powerful. And then during this time, I also used ChatGPT for other things. For many things, I was very impressed with the way this technology has progressed. Just last year, it was not there in terms of the general availability. It was very advanced 10 years ago. I used to work in IBM, and they had come up with the Watson computer, people might be aware of, which defeated the Jeopardy rating champion. It was almost 15 years ago. So the technology was powerful enough then, but there's key differences between that era and this era, which started about 6 or 8 years ago. So we can go deeper into that, but essentially that's the genesis of this batch of artificial intelligence. And if needed, I can explain more why it is so transformative. But in that process, I discovered that people know about it because of the hype. People are excited about it, but many people are afraid of it because whenever people talk about artificial intelligence, the first thing that comes to mind is a movie like Terminator or science fiction. And in my book, I've mentioned why it is not that yet. And it has the potential, but it's not there yet. And I'm an eternal optimist, so I don't think it'll ever get there because of the way I think about the technology and because of the way it will evolve. It may become part of us, not against us, but that's something to be discussed in a broader topic. So yeah, I saw there was a lot of misunderstanding or with people. So I thought this is so useful and people should not have a barrier, especially at this stage where it is so benign. They can, transform their lives using it. So I decided to write a book to simplify it. It's a simple book. It's essentially a guide, a user guide, but I have broken it down from start to finish with plenty of examples. So normal people can just pick up the book and understand it and start using it. One more factor, and I'll stop at that, is I looked around and pretty much every single book I came across was more about how you can get rich quick, or the similar kind of messaging that you don't have to work hard and you can just pick it up and then next day you will be rich. That kind of a thinking, and ultimately you have to put in the work. That's where I'm coming from. That hey, learn it like any other tool, and then use it to the best of your needs. I'll stop there.
All right. Well, one of the things you said was you feel like ChatGPT can help improve people's lives. So can you tell us a little bit about what are the benefits of it and how specifically can it improve the lives of regular people that are not techies?
Essentially, you have the world at your fingertips in the language you know, in the way you talk. So it's the easiest tool that you can use with the widest impact that it can have. So for anyone, be it a scientist, a student, a doctor, a child, if the parents allow access, that they can use their language, their level of understanding, and just converse. It's a conversational interface. And essentially,
let me ask you, do you have a real world example? Say I'm a teacher.
Yeah.
And I've just heard about ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
What's ChatGPT going to do for me? How am I going to be able to use that in the real world?
Yeah.
To improve my life?
Right. So at the most basic level, you can think of anything tedious you do. You can ask it to do it as if it was your assistant, as if a real person was sitting next to you, which won't complain to you, which will listen to you without any bad feedback. You just ask it to do something. For example, if you're a teacher, you give some initial information that this is what I do and this is the lesson I'm doing in the class, and can you create a lesson plan for me? Or based on the knowledge you have, can you create a quiz for me? You can then tell the assistant, make the quiz harder because my students are in high school and I teach another class, same topic, but fifth graders, can you make the quiz which is appropriate for the fifth graders? You can ask it to exclude certain things. You can ask it to make it funny. You can ask it to make it sound as if it was from Shakespeare. So because it has so much context and training, it can adapt and predict the next words based on the instructions so that they appear as if Shakespeare wrote them, so that they appear as if fifth grader expects them. So essentially, that's one very small example. The simplest example you could think of where you can just give it to generate some text.
So you basically use it as a personal assistant.
Yes, that's the most basic. There's much more you can do, which I have described a bit briefly, and if we have a chance, we can go through in this podcast. But yeah,
And I think you go over it much more in detail in your book, but in an easy to understand way.
Yeah, if I can explain my book the way I designed it, because I've been in the computer industry for 25 years, and majority of my time was spent with the early mentoring I got with some great mentors. Is technology is just a tool set. As long as you understand the human problem you're trying to solve, you'll be okay. So I've always put myself in the middle of humans and technology so I can make it easier for them. So take the burden of the technical jargon myself and then translate it to them.
I think what I was trying to get at is, like, if I'm a teacher, I can use it as a personal assistant to help me write quizzes or lesson plans or things like that. And that you go in more detail about the book. So if I'm a teacher and I want to find out more about it, I can buy your book. And I will put the link to your book in my show notes. So if you're interested in checking it out, just go right down to my show notes.
And I think what I was getting to, by the way, I just remembered that I was trying to describe the way I've structured the book so it's easy for everyone.
Oh,
the first, there's 3 sections in the book, and then the conclusion and quiz and so on. The first section, I start off very simple explanation, couple of pages on what it actually means, similar to what I've tried to describe on this podcast in simple terms. Then how to access it. That's the simplest thing someone would ask first. I've provided direct links and so on. And I've then started describing more than what people know, right? But focusing on the simpler portions and describing other things so that people know that there is much more that can be done. For example, most people don't know there are almost 5 ways to access it, but people only know this one way where they can get access to the site and open a prompt window where you have a text box, you can chat with it. But then there is something called a playground, which gives you an ability to control granular nuances of ChatGPT. If you want it to be more creative, or if you want it to be very deterministic, you can change all of those things. If you want to see probabilities of how it's calculating everything, you can see that. If you want to see how it's figuring out the questions, you can see that the programming behind it. So that is accessible to every user through the playground. So I've explained it to an extent that it's enough, but not too deep so that people don't get intimidated by that. Then there's a phone app which was just released. Previously, there were third parties which were interfacing with ChatGPT, providing that interface. Now it's from the same company. And I should mention that company is OpenAI, and I have a huge bit of admiration for that company, and I can go into some details there too. Then there is other ways to access ChatGPT where you can write a program and call it. So it can assist you in extending the power of your programming. Or it can call other programs, which are called plugins, where you can, and they've been recently released, which are pieces of programs that OpenAI, the company, approves to be used with ChatGPT. So when you do use ChatGPT, let's say you have a program which lets you read PDFs. So you can give it a link of a 1,000-page PDF that you want to summarize or ask questions on. So imagine if you were a doctor and you had a 5,000-page encyclopedia in PDF, and you don't want to go through the internet training that it had. You wanted to know what's in that PDF. So with that, you can connect it to that PDF and ask questions on that particular PDF. So these things most people don't know outside the technical community, and that's what propelled me to start writing this book. So that's the first section. Important to note, I've also covered the ethics of it, which is trying to address the problem head on, because that's something that is being discussed. It's very important out in the industry for some obvious reasons, and some not so obvious, which have to be really tackled, which, in fact, even the experts who design this don't know how to solve for some certain reasons. And I can go through them. Then the second section is purely examples, where I use ChatGPT to demonstrate for different types of users, students, teachers, doctors, artists, and so on how to use it. So the way I structured them was start with a few examples, specific examples, then give certain examples for users to try, one real live example for a small conversation between a user, that particular type of user and ChatGPT, and some exercises that users, if they're willing to put the work, they can do those exercises and learn it in a way. There's not much to learn it if you just want to have a chat, right? You just open it and
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking is for the regular users, because I know we talked a little bit about teachers and doctors, but I know for me, I can see this, another big group, of course, that would benefit from this are students. Because say they don't understand something in history or math or language, they could use this as a tool to kind of help summarize something or give a background history that they can then read. And I think that, at least for me, one of the big pluses of ChatGPT is it compresses time. So for instance, if you have a term paper due, back in the old days, you would go to the library, get the Rolodex out, look up the sources, you have to go find them. But now you can just go to ChatGPT and say, hey, I'm going to be writing a term paper on, the importance of architectural design in building bridges or something like that. And it can give you a list. And I know a lot of my listeners are coaches or people in the healing fields. A lot of writers. So you can just go in and say, make a list, make a list of blog ideas that I can use. Or if you want to write a blog on a certain topic or a podcast, you can ask GTP to write it and then edit it to make it your own. Right? I've done that a couple of times with a couple of my podcasts and blogs. Is just pop it in there, say, hey, ChatGPT, I want to write a podcast on small goals. And it'll spit something out and I'll copy it and then just completely rewrite it using some of their suggestions and then just completely put it back into my own words. But I'm wondering for something like, say you're a barista at Starbucks. That's probably not the only thing you do. Maybe you're in college. Maybe you have grand designs to be an actor or a writer, or you're just a super intelligent person that wants a nice, easy, uncomplicated life, and you love people and you love making coffee. But why would someone like that need ChatGPT? What's in it for them and how can they use it?
Yeah, so that's where I think basically I was hesitant earlier to just call it an assistant, right? It can be used for many different purposes. To me, the opportunity is limitless. Some not even thought about. For a barista, for example, if he or she has a different problem other than the profession, right? Trying to figure out something even emotional in his or her life, they can at least bounce off certain things from ChatGPT. It will have the context because it has such a wide range of context. If they want to prepare for the next stage in their career, if they want to interview somewhere for something else, if they want to just figure out anything, there's so many things that, there's a danger that you might forget your friends so it's very useful, but you're right that one of the biggest things it will help people do is make their lives more efficient by saving a lot of time. That will immediately open up time for a family or something else you would like to do. So then it's up to you how efficiently use that time, but it will open up the time for you. Or you can use that time to just accelerate yourself in the field you're in, even in personal life. Possibilities are truly endless by it being just a assistant. But imagine with the other uses I said, right, that you can use. And I've not even touched the surface, barely scratched the surface, because the topic of this podcast is ChatGPT. But AI is much, much bigger than that. And hopefully some curious minds who just started with ChatGPT would explore other things. This is just about text. There's videos, audio, imaging. There's real world interactions where they can manage control machines with that. They can.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely go down a rabbit hole with
Right.
AI in general.
Yeah.
Another thought that I had while you were talking is, say you're a mom and you walk over to ChatGPT, and it's really kind of easy, right? You just type ChatGPT into your browser and then open it up and open up a free account. And then you could say, you know what, ChatGPT, I have a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 12-year-old. Can you make a list of chores appropriate for each age level? That would be like a really nice practical example on how to improve your life there, rather than, having to talk to 100 different people and getting it.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned, because that's one of the first few examples I've used in my chapter called Day-to-Day Life, where if you want to do something like that, you can do that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And
so we've talked quite a bit about the benefits and how this type of thing can improve people's lives. But I know that there are a lot of people out there listening to this thinking, wow, ChatGPT is scary and there must be a lot of risks or drawbacks, with this new technology. So I'm wondering if you want to talk briefly about those and how people can mitigate these risks and drawbacks that they see.
Yeah, I'll start right off the bat saying that it's not Terminator. It's not that extreme. It's a very basic, even though it's so powerful, it's a very basic algorithm or program. And
because some people out there would say, well, this is the baby Terminator, though. It was just born.
No, it's still not. And I've cited some examples in my book, clearly telling people how to find that out for themselves. But this is a great opportunity for people to start normalizing this. So it does not remember what it learned from, because it broke up everything. So that's something that people should know, that anything that was fed, that's what its response is based on. So the common problem that we see is biases that are in the real world data. They show up because they were fed into it, not intentionally, but they exist in the world, about race, about discrimination, so on. That's one of the biggest problems. So for example, misinformation, right? People can generate stories, very believable stories, and post them. That's a direct misuse that anyone can do. There's misuse where people can plagiarize. Well, not necessarily, because there's a technical reason why it's very hard to detect plagiarism from ChatGPT, because it does not actually use direct sentences. It just pieces it together. But coincidentally, actually, it might, if you ask it to generate something like Ernest Hemingway, it will take that into context, and it might generate something which almost overlaps with what Hemingway wrote. And imagine that for scientific papers and so on. So that misinformation or plagiarism can happen. There is privacy concerns, even though OpenAI took extreme care in not putting in private data. This program can be connected to other things, which may not take care of privacy as much as this was designed with. And you will have to really, if you're owner of that program or that business, you'll have to be careful that you have taken care of either the privacy or consent. One real example is if doctors use it. One subtle thing that I should mention is that OpenAI, unless you opt out of it, it will store and use your chats, all the interactions, in further training ChatGPT. By logging in, you consent to that automatically, unless you go in the data setting, which I've explained in my book, to turn it off. So users, unknowingly, until this is, really made clear to people, they will unknowingly be talking about personal stuff, private stuff that will be used by OpenAI. Now, I think OpenAI still sanitizes it before it trains, because that's the way it needs to be. According to them, that ChatGPT should learn the abstractness of things, but not the specificity of certain things. and many other considerations they have. So they have been very good about that. Its stated purpose, OpenAI's stated purpose is to use AI to do good. So they're very serious about that. But because it's a computer program, because we have more powerful computers on our desktop than we used to send man to the moon, you can practically have an AI running on your small laptop, which is 90% as powerful as ChatGPT. And that's all you need. You can chain together AIs to beat on top of each other. There's programs already on the internet which chain together several versions of ChatGPT to get a sequence of tasks done. With the connection with the website, you can have ChatGPT access any website, or if you give it credentials, it can access any other private areas if you decide to do that. The plugins the world is now a different world. Okay, so there are lots of, I've explained a lot of this in ethics and considerations. I'd recommend people to seriously read that. I kept it very simple at a high level, just to cover the basic salient points. There's separate AI coverage in my advanced chapters on plugins, because then you are using other people's plugins, which have their own problems or advantages. Or if you're using ChatGPT to create an application in your programming, then you have to make sure that you are getting the right consent. You're protecting your user's information. Even if you're submitting to ChatGPT, you are responsible for it. There's a lot of things that could go wrong if you, part of the current regulations. And this technology is so fast, we are in the exponential curve of human growth. It'll be hard for regulations to control or be ahead of these without stifling the innovation. So a lot of things that are serious, but at the same time, I look at it from an optimistic lens, and my book has an optimistic lens because it's written for normal people. And majority of those people, or a huge majority, would be benign, who want to do good for their lives, want to improve. And those are the people who this is book for. It's a very optimistic book to open that door for people and tell them it's nothing to fear.
So I'm guessing that a lot of people out there are, one of the first things they're thinking is that jobs are going to disappear. Writing jobs, teaching jobs. This is going to lead to a huge job loss, which then could lead to more homelessness and more economic division, more economic instability. So how might people mitigate that?
Yeah, so first I would obviously, I think I don't agree with those statements in the way people think about them, because many times people need, at least I like to do this, where I step back and look at a larger picture, longer time horizon. So if you go back when there were horse-drawn carriages and when the cars showed up, same conversations took place. But people who learned how to drive a car just transitioned to a different job. Jobs were not lost, and those jobs were better paying, higher paying, because there was a newer technology involved. And this has happened over and over at every juncture. When fire was discovered, or when the wheel was invented, all these things happened. Same when iPhones came along, or computers came along, word processors came along, typists were out of business, but if they learned the word processing, they were much more powerful typists. So what I think is the jobs won't disappear. It will be the people's choices. The choices they make will make their jobs disappear. So
there'll be more like a job transition rather than a job disappearance.
Yeah, and I have kind of mentioned some of this in the book, that the decision makers, especially, let's say, business people, small business people, I've recommended that they retrain their employees, because, as I said at the early at the top of this podcast, that personally, the way I have managed my career was always keep business first, the user first, not the technology or the tool. So my advice to small businesses or others is, don't take this tool as a replacement for anything. Teach the current people, because they know about your business. If in a doctor's office, the office staff knows about the patients, the privacy concerns, how to interact with the patients, ChatGPT is not going to replace all of that. If you give this tool to them, they will be much better administrators. They will be much brighter. They'll be much knowledgeable. So it will help you. So that's how you can boost everything. So I don't think it's a replacement, unless people take the pessimistic route and give up, which has nothing to do with ChatGPT, which has everything to do with a change. So it's just a change. It's just faster this time. You need to be able to adapt faster. You need to take a step back and look at the broader picture. Because if you look at it too closely, then you cannot see the changes happening. You have to step back. And that's when you start learning exponential curves. And this is where we are at. And this is
all very good points. All very good points. So what do you think the biggest ethical considerations are when using ChatGPT? And how can people sort of monitor themselves to keep its use ethical?
I think I've touched on some of these points before, but the common point that I'd like to make is ultimately it's not going to be about the technology. It's going to be about the people. Are they making the right decisions?
And I would imagine, if you are writing a term paper, the ethical use would be to use it as an assistant and not use it as writing your whole term paper and turning it in. Again, to use it as an assistant.
Yeah, and notwithstanding the other things I mentioned about privacy, about biases and so on, I think as humanity, regardless of what progress we make, those things are going to be constant for a long time to come until we get to a stage where we can just biologically modify ourselves to just adapt to everything. But until then, those things are always going to be major questions in any growth curve, any technology curve, that are we being ethical? Are we treating people fairly? Are we ignoring the biases? Are we, carrying people along who are, less fortunate? So those things won't change if there's ChatGPT or there's some other technology. So I think people
very well said.
People should always keep that in mind before they even think about using technology. When they drive a car, they should take care of certain rules. It's the same thing in anything else.
Yeah, true. So one of the things that I like to do at the end of each of my podcasts is give a call to action to people. So I'm wondering if you would be interested in giving people a call to action today in relationship to ChatGPT.
Well, that's been
besides just jumping down and buying your book.
That I would never explicitly want to do that, because I think my wife just sitting in front of me says that it should be from within, not without, which I believe also. So it's for people to decide what will help them start. You don't need to buy my book to get started. You go to chat.openai.com and get started if you're already a little bit familiar with any kind of chatting. So the call to action to me is non-ChatGPT related, which is the theme of what I talked about, is life's too short to be not optimistic. At some point, every moment people have a fork in the road, every moment of their lives, to take a decision versus another decision. And there's no difference in terms of what will happen to the world if you take a pessimistic or optimistic decision. But the probability is, if you take an optimistic decision, your next actions will build on top of that. If you take the negative side, your next actions will build on top of that. So my call to action is stay optimistic, be open to these technologies, become part of the solution, not part of the problem. So if this, let's say, some of you will discover newer things in ChatGPT, you might be surprised that if you come up with certain guidelines that you can jump in to add to, there's nothing stopping you from contacting OpenAI and so on. My recommendation always is to stay positive and constructive and just be open to ideas, because, as I said, we are in an exponential path right now, and the faster we adapt, the faster we understand, the better we'll be equipped to manage the negative sides of it. Right? So contribute to the discussions, your lawmakers and so on, if they are making some regulatory discussions, and just jump in. That's kind of my call to action.
Very good advice. Very good advice.
Thank you.
Well, Harish, thank you very much for being on our show. And we look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Thank you. It was nice being here and talking to you.
All right. Take care.